Thanks very much. Right, so I don't normally have a background slide about me. I explained to Martin why I did this time. The two key things I'd say is the second point. A lot of what I'm going to be covering is as a result of what we found over the last 5 years, or what does and doesn't result in action post-security awareness in charities and small organisations. The last point is that my early part of my career, I worked for local authorities which funded voluntary organisations, and I used to represent them on the boards of the voluntary organisations. That's my background. So in terms of getting started, first thing, in terms of the way that we look at this, the problem statement from our point of view is looking at how we can help charities as small organisations to understand the urgency to initiate the required cybersecurity controls to protect grants, donations, data, whatever it might be, during a period of development in which they don't have the time, the knowledge or financial resources to implement the required controls. The way that we look at it is, you know, how do we raise the bar? That's what we're trying to do. And that's hopefully what I'm going to be covering from our experience of the last few years in the work that we've been doing. Things that you're familiar with, this is from a DLA Piper study, and it wasn't a couple of years ago, this was early this year, January 21. A few key facts and figures here. One is that, you know, the number of sort of failures to comply rose by nearly 40%. The ICO received just over 2,500 data breach notifications in Q4 alone, and that was by those who actually identified a breach. Obviously, there are many organisations out there that maybe have been breached but don't know it even today. And charities and voluntary organisations actually accounted for 172 of these in terms of data breaches, and of which 58 were due to cybercrime. Also, 114 of the 172 instances were due to self-inflicted incidents, such as sending emails to the wrong recipients, failure to dispose of computer hardware securely, losing laptops and those sorts of things. Okay, the next bit of facts on figures I've got for you is from the government's DCMS's Cybersecurity Data Breaches Survey, and that was this year, earlier on. I was involved in this in terms of looking at what they should consider, because I was, through the Cybersecurity Council, I led the thought leadership work stream in the formation project, and we were involved in advising on this the data breach survey. And this survey found that 26% of the nearly 500 organisations reported breaches over the previous year, of which 39% suffered a data breach or an attack. And the interesting thing is 51%, let's say just over a half, had an annual income of over $500,000, and the other half had less than $1 million. So it depends on which way you look at it as to whether you think you're a small organisation or not a small organisation and how you were impacted. A friend of mine is a trustee for a charity, and in that charity, they consider themselves a small organisation. They've got 10 staff, and they have a grant from the government of $8,500,000, and they are small organisations. So whichever way you look at it, you know, and what your boundaries are for calling yourself small or not so small. 25% suffered attacks that where they dealt with on a weekly basis. 18% ended up losing money, data or something else. And even if money, data or assets were not lost, 40% still had negative impact in one way, shape, form or another. I think this is the last stat that I've got for you, and this is from the Ecclesiastical Insurance Company. And again, they found similar sort of picture in terms of charities are being affected. And really what I wanted to emphasize was, I know perhaps the bigger charities know that they are targets of some of the unscrupulous criminals out there, but many of the small ones tend to think that they are not targets. And really what I wanted to get across was charities are target by accident or by design. And by design is sometimes when, you know, there are phishing attacks specifically to an organization, and not by design is where they're basically, it's by accident where they've decided that they are pinging certain IP addresses and finding out what they find, and then they respond that way when they find a hole that they can exploit. Next, I just want to very quickly mention that there are lots and lots of things going on in the news all the time. On the left-hand side, you've got effectively Google, and this is over a couple of days ago, I took that screenshot. This is news items on data breaches. So if you look at charity data breach, I took this, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday this week, and there's always plenty there. The middle one, this is the UK arm of Salvation Army hit by ransomware. This was on the 30th of June. And it does seem like that they're going to lose a lot of money. The last one is the Blackboard sort of bank details, passwords at risk thing, which was last year in October. That's October the 1st last year. So there are lots of attacks that do take place all the time. And it's possible that the charity might be targeted, it's possible that it might not be, but it's also possible in this last example where the charity is actually a sort of accidentally hit because the third party supplier is the one that's been hit and the charity gets impacted as a result of that. And really, I mean, you know, we've been looking for a couple of years at why is it that cybersecurity doesn't get started at all in many small organizations. And this is as a result of some of the work we've done as advisors, as consultants, as advisors of startups, and all sorts of different types of organizations and charities we've worked with as well. And there are many, many reasons. Amongst them is that they've all got very, very different starting points for security, whether they are driven by cybersecurity or they're driven by data protection or by PCI DSS, but they've got different starting points, and some of them don't have any of those as a starting point. There are far too many unknown things to learn and do, so there's too many new things and different priorities on security governance as the good starting point, and those priorities tend to sort of whittle away to nothing in many cases. Individuals and trustees don't form charities to get into, to get to be good at cybersecurity. They get into forming a charity to do the good that they want to do. It's not to get good at being good security people, and that is a key thing. You don't get in to do this sort of thing, but you're going to have to do it if you want to protect your resources. Many public approaches to cybersecurity are a big distracting project, meaning if you want to do it well, the way that many approaches you see on the internet, if you're looking at trying to get into security for your organization, is that they get you involved in many, many big projects to improve your security, and they are distraction. It should be something that you can do alongside everything else. And many cases that we've seen on the internet, the approaches are that it's a big mega project. Cybersecurity is the domain of technical people, we hear people say, or hackers, or those that really enjoy that sort of thing. And for very early stage charities, cybersecurity doesn't provide any value for them, is another thing that we've heard. And there are many, many misconceptions, like we don't have the money or we're too small. We see this and hear it often time and time again. From the government's website or on their own statistics, that's where I've taken this from. This is non-profit organisations. You can see that 89.9% represents the less than 19 size organisation, not less than 19 employees. Or another way of looking at it, you can break it down. The 0 to 4 employees is a total of 61.4%. Yeah, 61.4%. And that is quite a big percentage when you look at in terms of the sizes, and we are talking about very small organisations. Now, in terms of looking at the sort of 0 to 19 employees, some of the challenges in securing these organisations. I mean, those who've been around cybersecurity for a while, like Martin, will relate to the first one. You know, after 20 years of cybersecurity awareness, why is it that we are still producing bad passwords? You know, the world is very, very complex. It's got more complex over a period of time, and small organizations have to contend with conflicting priorities before they get to a point in time where they can allocate resources on cybersecurity. And cybersecurity skill shortage has meant that many of these skills are not only out of reach for the early stage or organizations, but it leaves them open to market forces, which means that they are very much more expensive. A lack of, you know, sort of good sources of trusted, practical, useful information and advice is missing. The lack of time and resources to identify and select and utilize even the free resources out there is also difficult and a challenge for many organizations. So this is the first one of the slides on this topic, but there are many, many other challenges. I'm not going to go into great detail, but basically we're talking about awareness, we're talking about understanding, priorities, again, comes up. We've heard, you know, the actions are often in response to things going wrong, and that charities normally wait until something goes wrong before they do something. And the staff and boards don't know how to work together. So there are a whole range of different reasons as to what causes the challenges, as to why they don't get involved. Amongst those that we've come across is, you know, where do charities get started? And, you know, when you look at something like this from McKinsey, this is a great chart, and I use it when we work with organizations, which are large organizations. But if you're a small charity thinking about getting started, and if you knew that this is what was in store for you, it would be very daunting and put you off, because you are miles away from where you might want to be. And really, you're at the start of your journey. It seems like a never-ending journey. And where and what's the incentive for many organizations to get incited is a question we get asked. Well, you know, why should we be doing this? You know, we didn't set out charity to do this sort of thing. So, you know, what cybersecurity do small charities actually need from the formation stage of 0 through to 19? And, you know, it's a complex answer. And, you know, and I'm not trying to pick on the NCSC, but just use some of the materials as an example. We know that this sort of thing here really doesn't work. And just because it's free doesn't mean it's going to work. I've seen lots of things from NCSC. They have got some good materials, but unfortunately the content may be good, but the presentation isn't necessarily as good to make it easy to understand. Because on the right-hand side, you can't tell whether that's a poster, an infographic, or it's a checklist. What is that supposed to be, and how are small organizations supposed to be using it? And taking it further, I mean, we've taken that image that's on the left-hand side. Now we've took that and we passed it through our graphics people, and we tested some things out, and we said, look, what would make it usable? And we created lots of different examples to find out what works and what doesn't work. But even if you get beyond that and you create good graphics, better graphics on their own don't work. You know, it's not going to cut what you know, charities actually need. We need, you know, they do need a lot more than just fancy looking graphics. And in terms of that, you know, we felt, and through the research that we had been doing, that any approach that we have for charities needs to include lots of things, because there is no single definition which you can say that all charities from 0 to 19 employees fit into this hole or that hole. And because they're so very, very different, what they need, you know, are very, very different. It's not just the size that makes it different. It's also what they do, how they do it, the way that they do it, the focus. You know, there's a big difference between those charities that work in health or mental health or AIDS or give advice, or those that work around, let's say, environmental charities, or those that work around sports charities, or whatever it might be, or the Cubs or Scouts. And the thing is, they're all very, very different. And because they're different, what's required is something that's flexible. So an accessible entry point, we thought was important. Real practical, actionable information for standalone or collective use. What we found speaking to charities was that sometimes they might want to take this route, which is a structured route, and other times they might want to take a very unstructured route. They want a bit of this and a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of that, and you know, it varies. Also, the content must be able to coach staff and board members to work together on developing joint action plans, because sometimes we found where a board doesn't know what to do. So what do? They supposedly empower an IT person to go away and do what they need to do. Whatever is produced needs to be simple to read and understand for non-cybersecurity professionals. Also, although I've commented on NCSC material, there's a lot of good content out there. Whatever content is NCSC produced, whatever we do or anyone else does, and anything that you look at, it mustn't conflict with the guidance. So the guidance that NCSC come up with is very good guidance. All that we were commenting on is the way that it's presented and the completeness of that for it to be used by the variety of different organizations that need to be using it. Multiple flexible resources and approaches to learning. It can't be a single way, as I've said. Awareness, information on risks, threats, knowledge, and I'll come back to the awareness and knowledge in a few minutes, and you'll get a better understanding of what we mean. A user community, the idea is that you should be able to share and learn from each other, and there should be community champions, because I think, you know, as organizations grow and they develop, that you develop expertise. And also, in terms of the knowledge, there needs to be a knowledge of understanding why they need to take action and the value of it in multiple formats. If you remember, you know, training courses or going to school, many schools nowadays try and incorporate many different styles and approaches to learning. We haven't done that completely, but what we try and do, and we think that any resource should look at, is printed, video and podcasts, so that people can listen to, watch, read, whatever is appropriate for them. How to prioritize where they can get started according to different circumstances. A 2-employee organization that's been around for 5 years and don't intend to grow much more than that, because the service they provide is local, is different from a 0-employee charity that's just got set up and they intend to go for government funding and expand to 10, 15 employees, for example. So the starting point in terms of getting started on cybersecurity is very different for everyone. And we think that, you know, whatever is provided needs to account for those sorts of things. It needs to provide benchmarks, checklists, how-tos, frequently asked questions, all of those sorts of things. It needs to be rich so that people can look at and go to where they want to in terms of the way that they work. Benchmarks based on requirements. I was talking to Martin earlier on and explaining that what we try and do in our benchmarks is we've taken some of the work that the NCSC have done and we've made it workable, we think, for a variety of different audiences, where if you're at the early stage, you might want to take things slightly more basic and you take one benchmark, whereas the same benchmark for someone more mature will require you to achieve a higher mark. And then a benchmark for those that's far more mature might expect a much higher pass mark. So it's those sorts of things, so that you are looking at not just where you are now, but where you intend to be, and a variety of other factors that are taken into consideration. So in terms of our response, what we're trying to do and what I'd like to see happen in terms of what's out there for charities and small organizations is a new way of looking at and providing things. So this is what we try and do. So we believe that on the left, secure behavior is a combination of awareness, where people are aware and they understand, and with the intention. And the awareness part of it is two things. It's the pure awareness and it's knowledge. Together, if you add with it the intention that they intend to comply because they understand why they need to comply and they understand the issues involved by way of policies, requirements, and whatever else there might be, together with the skills that they need. So just because you've got the awareness and the knowledge and you intend to do things doesn't necessarily mean that you've got the skills or that it's feasible in the right way. So we try and look at all of those things, and how we look at that is the next slide. It's an example of passwords. So basically, if you look at password-related security issues, when we break things down, on the left-hand side, you've got the awareness and the knowledge. We put them together and we brainstorm all the questions that organizations would be interested in having answered. And then all the other things like the skills, the tools, response, and how you share is the second part. So we break, when we write content, we break it up into 2 groups, and those are the 2 groups. And on the first one, we pull that together in a coordinated way to actually help organizations understand why they need to do what they need to be doing, what goes wrong, why it goes wrong. So some of those questions like, you know, how hackers get into your network, behavior that helps attackers to compromise your network. So we look at all of those things. And first of all, then the second part is where we try and work with organizations to help them in the content that we create is what they need to do and what's relevant for different sized organizations and according to what their priorities are. And if they want to treat it as a project, how do they treat this as a project? Everything from policy in terms of passwords that you can get right, or if you don't want to worry about policies right now because that's not immediate and you want to start doing things and you want to start implementing some of the good practice that needs to be implemented, we cover that as well. So whichever approach you have is the way that we try and break things down. The next slide is sort of going back a couple of steps and where this fits in. So what we do is we map out, or we've mapped out all of these things. On the right hand side, you've got the threat actors and the different types of attacks that they use, and really we look at how they use those. And then on the left hand side, or the extreme left, you've got the targets and the assets that they try and go for. And in the middle are all those things that they're going to have to go through to get from one side to get to the assets. So the first lot of things is the control breakdowns, user behaviors, myths, misconceptions, assumptions, those sorts of things, the technology issues. And then you've got what is it that extends the attack surface. So that's things like the human side of things, the more number of people that are involved, the devices, the environments and so on. And then the control groups, these are controls that, you know, organizations will put into practice. So we explore those in more detail. Then we look at the waypoints. What is it that they're going to have to get through to get those final targets that they might be able to sell? And really what we try and do is we talk about these things in as far as we can from a non-technical perspective. We provide some technical aspects to it, but we carry on reminding people that they don't need to know everything and that they don't need to sort of understand absolutely everything. They might need to know it. I mean, for example, on our session on malware, the way we look at it is when you've been hit by malware, you don't actually care whether it's a virus or something else. You need to deal with it. You need to deal with it quickly. What we try and do is help you identify what the impacts are and all of those sorts of things, and look at it from that sort of perspective and what you need to do about it. So we try as best as we can not to get tied down with too many technical things, but accepting that there is technical language involved in what you have to do. So we appreciate that, because if we didn't do that, there's no way that you know, the long-term aim in terms of educating, we're going to get there. So we do have sessions on each one of these things, and each week when we have content, and what we do is, if this was a map here, if we strip this down to passwords, an article on passwords, we would strip all of these things down to what is relevant for passwords. So we will take out all the contents on the threat attacks, and then we'll break the content control breakdown and all of these things. So basically what you'll have is this image here of all of the mapping that's appropriate for passwords and nothing else. So each week we try and create sort of maps that we think and we hope are easy to understand and get to grips with. Right, I'm aware of time. What we're trying to do is make it easier to learn and to take timely action. You can't take action on absolutely everything, but what we want to do is get people started on the journey and start with things that they find that they can do easily and quick win type things. So we do break down awareness and knowledge. I've covered that, and separate from action planning and so on. We do provide graphical overview of topics, and we provide our in our articles where we have a checklist. When you view that page, you can start ticking things, and as you do it, we show you a progress chart, and it tells you what you've how far you've got. And that is personalized. So if somebody else looking at that page, that checklist is personalized for them. So you can follow that all the way through. And that's similar for our other sort of goals and our planning. When you go through the checklist there and you tick that you've done it, again, it's personal to you. So that type of content is within generic content that everyone else sees, but it looks like it's what you see is just yours, although the top and the bottom, certain bits in the middle might be generic for everyone else. So we've got, we use how-tos in the community, we use frequently asked questions, as well as Q&As. So we try and use that in a variety of innovative ways, so that people can ask the questions. When we cover topics, we try and let people know beforehand what we're going to be covering. And if you've got questions you'd like to see us answered, that's what we want to be guided by. The aim is that we are guided by the community as to what we're writing and how we're writing it, and bringing in the things that are particular to them. We provide, apart from the graphics that I've said, we've got lots of downloadable resources like policies and things like that. We've got daily quick actions and so on, glossary lists, community sharing experience and so on. We cover threats as well, some of the latest threats that are in the news, etc., and what to do in emergencies. And from our point of view, our challenge is that we need to be looking at, and we want to make it easier to be more secure, to raise the bar. RTB, if you may have noticed earlier on, is raise the bar. We want to raise the bar so that attackers find it harder to attack charities. That's really one of the key things that we're trying to do. Ensure that functionality works for each micro-sized organization is important for us, and that's a challenge that we have. And introducing, we've got functionality-rich interface, but the thing is, we're not going to release everything on day one, because we want to release it slowly so that we're not overloading our users. Identify core groups of charity champions, people like yourselves. You know, there are, you know, some people already who understand good security principles, but the thing is, they don't have time to educate. But using our interface, we're hoping that we can enlist them to share some of that knowledge and experience that they have. We challenge the other challenges. NCSC, they've got some really good content, but we want to make it more useful. You know, we want to create personalized checklists, action plans, and navigate between everything and make it really, really accessible. What we want to be doing is working with umbrella organizations, perhaps like yours, where we make some of the content that we have available to yourselves, where you can send it out as a newsletter, and that's the awareness side. And if anyone that reads it wants to do something about it, then perhaps to contact yourselves or us, and we will sort of make some of the content that we have available on subscription through yourselves at really discounted prices, because they are charities, and that we want to start making sure that we raise that bar. That's me, and I'm concerned that I was going to overrun, and so I speeded up, and I'm in my last 50 seconds now. So questions, I'm going to open it up in a second, or Martin will. Really, if you're thinking about how can you participate in using our content to raise the bar, all you need to do is contact me either through this email address or through Martin on CSF. I'm more than happy to discuss things with you. I hope this has been useful. We're very passionate about what we've been learning about charities and what they need. And we think we're not there yet. We don't by any means believe we're going to get there. Things will change, but we certainly think we are further ahead than some of the things that we've seen on the internet. That's me, and I finished in 8 seconds to spare. So back to you, Martin.
That's absolutely brilliant, Sarb. Real good high-level content. I think that's absolutely brilliant stuff. Lots and lots to take away in that.